The Second World War introduced a terrifying new front, the night sky. As bombers sought the cloak of darkness, the defenders evolved to meet them in the black void. The Luftwaffe's Nachtjagd, the night fighter force, became a corps of spectral predators. Their pilots were not just flying, they were hunting in an environment designed to kill them. These were the night aces, men like Heinz Wolfgang Schnorfer, who mastered the unforgiving art of nocturnal interception. They flew heavily armed aircraft, primarily the twin-engine Messerschmitt Bf-110 and later the Junkers Ju-88. Each machine was fitted with primitive, yet revolutionary, airborne radar systems like the FUG-220 Liechtenstein. This radar allowed them to close the final, crucial gap between the unseen enemy and a firing solution. Their mission was to break the backbone of the Royal Air Force's bomber streams as they crossed the Rhine. Operating in silence and often alone, their success depended on exceptional training, razor-sharp instincts, and raw courage. They would stalk their targets from below, using the Schrage music upward-firing cannon to devastating effect. The bomber crews had no warning, the attack came from the blind spot, often tearing the wings off the plane in a single pass. The skies over Europe became their personal, dark-cloaked arena of combat. For a time, the night aces truly ruled the dark, their presence an existential threat to every bomber crew. Their methods were a brutal but effective answer to the massive Allied nighttime offensive. The concept of the dedicated night fighter was born from desperation after the early successes of the British night bombing campaign. Initial efforts were often clumsy, relying on searchlight batteries and ground-controlled interception that proved insufficient. The development of onboard radar was the game-changer that transformed the defensive struggle. These early radar sets were bulky, unreliable, and required constant, finicky adjustment in the cockpit. The crews who flew these aircraft developed an almost symbiotic relationship with their electronic equipment. The night aces learned to interpret the flickering green screens of the radar as an extension of their own vision. Pilots like Helmut Lent and Wolfgang Falk pioneered the tactics that would define the night fighter war. They instituted a system known as Helle Nachtjagd, or bright night fighting, which was later supplemented by darker, more aggressive methods. Their personal scores mounted, turning them into national heroes whose kills were tracked obsessively by German propaganda. Each victory added to the myth of the invincible Luftwaffe night defense. They could endure the crushing fatigue of multiple scrambles in a single night, driven by the knowledge that they were the last line of defense. The average lifespan of an Allied bomber crew dipped alarmingly low under the sustained pressure of these dedicated hunters. This relentless, personalized form of aerial warfare was a duel between man and man in the pitch black. The aces represented the pinnacle of individual skill and technological adaptation in the European theater. Their dark domain was a place where a single pilot's expertise could sway the outcome of entire campaigns. The bombing offensive against Germany was a necessary, brutal strategy intended to cripple their industrial and military capacity. The Royal Air Force's Bomber Command launched wave after wave of aircraft under the cover of night. These bomber streams were vast, complex logistical operations that stretched the resources of the Allies to the breaking point. For the bomber crews, the journey was a test of endurance through extreme cold, flak fire, and the ever-present danger of the night aces. Every sortie was a statistical gamble against the improving German defenses. The pilots flying Lancaster and Halifax bombers knew the odds were stacked against them from the moment they took off. The sheer volume of aircraft lost over the course of the war speaks to the terrifying effectiveness of the German counter-effort. Cities like Hamburg, Berlin, and Cologne became scenes of unimaginable firestorms and destruction. The Allies pressed on, believing that the constant pressure would eventually break the German will to fight. This strategic deadlock created an arms race in the dark, where every new Allied countermeasure was met with a swift German response. The development of jamming techniques and electronic warfare became as vital as the aircraft themselves. The night aces, however, proved exceptionally resilient to these countermeasures, finding new ways to home in on their prey. Their success perpetuated the grim cycle of destruction and retaliation that characterized the air war over Europe. The desperate dance between the bomber and the hunter continued without end for years. As the air war in Europe reached its zenith, a new, formidable machine was being readied for the Pacific theater, the Boeing B-29 Superfortress. This aircraft was a leap in bomber technology, designed to operate at altitudes and distances previously thought impossible. It could fly higher and carry a larger payload than any of its predecessors, marking a new era of strategic bombing. Its pressurized cabin and advanced systems were intended to alleviate the physical strain on its crew during long-range missions. The B-29 was primarily conceived for the vast distances of the Pacific, targeting the Japanese mainland. It was in this new theater that its revolutionary defensive armament would truly be tested. The night aces of the Luftwaffe never directly faced the Superfortress in combat, but their legacy of deadly night interception is crucial context. The B-29's design anticipated the threats of a sophisticated enemy air force. Its defensive strength was centralized and coordinated, a radical departure from the independent gun positions of earlier bombers. This centralization was the technological precursor to the automated defense systems that would eventually render individual pilot skill less decisive. The bomber's arrival signaled an end to the era of purely individualistic dogfighting tactics. It was a machine designed for systematic, long-haul destruction, protected by layers of calculated technology. The B-29 Superfortress housed a groundbreaking defensive innovation, the General Electric Central Fire Control System. This system was the first fully remote-controlled military fire control mechanism in a mass-produced aircraft. Instead of each gunner sitting directly behind their guns, the crew operated the turrets from pressurized, protected stations. They used sophisticated analog computers to calculate complex variables like lead, windage, and ballistic drop. The 5 remote turrets, armed with .50 caliber machine guns, could be aimed and fired from 3 sighting stations. 2 gunners in the pressurized section could each control multiple turrets, vastly improving coordination and field of fire. The system allowed for unprecedented accuracy and concentration of defensive fire from various angles. This design protected the gunners from the extreme cold and oxygen deprivation of high-altitude flight. The central computer, called the Analog Electrical Gunnery Computer, integrated the information from the sights. It calculated the exact point in space where the projectile and the target would intersect. This was a major step towards automated defense, moving the process away from pure human estimation. It demonstrated that technology could outperform the best human reflexes in specific, high-speed calculations. The system was a testament to American industrial and scientific muscle applied to the problem of aerial defense. The night aces relied on human error in the dark, a vulnerability the B-29 sought to eliminate. The historical night aces, despite their radar-guided advantage, were still bound by the limitations of human perception and reaction time. They required precious seconds to interpret their radar, maneuver their heavy fighters, and adjust for the bomber's evasive actions. A successful attack run was a symphony of manual adjustments, precise throttle control, and split-second decisions. The Night Ace was a master craftsman, but the craft itself was inherently flawed by the human element. As Allied countermeasures, such as the introduction of window, chaff, and airborne radar jammers, became more prevalent, the Aces were forced to adapt their hunting methods. They began relying more on visual sightings after a close-in radar approach, a technique known as cat's eyes. This adaptation often brought them dangerously close to the enemy, increasing their own risk. Their ultimate advantage was their ability to think, to anticipate a bomber's movements, and to exploit tactical errors. The Aces represented the peak of the human warrior in the high-stakes environment of aerial combat. They understood the psychological impact of their presence, often choosing to strike with unnerving suddenness. Their success was a victory of experience and cunning over sheer technological might, for a time. But the speed of jet bombers and the complexity of future defenses would eventually outpace their personal skill. The very nature of aerial warfare was preparing to shift away from the dogfight and into the realm of computational speed. The limitations of the B-29 Central Fire Control System were not mechanical, but human. Even with the analog computer assisting, the gunners had to manually track the target with their sighting periscopes. Combat stress, physical vibration, and the simple difficulty of maintaining a stable track at high speed introduced errors. Fatigue over long missions could degrade the gunner's ability to input precise tracking data. A minor fluctuation in the gunner's hand on the joystick would translate into a significant misdistance at range. The enemy Night Ace, a quick and unpredictable target, often exploited this small window of human delay. The Night Ace's success was often predicated on the brief moment of confusion after the first sighting. Despite the advanced nature of the B-29 system, it was still a closed-loop system dependent on human input. The gunner was the critical point of failure in an otherwise flawless defensive chain. The sheer violence of a fighter pass made accurate aiming an almost impossible task. In the dark, the contrast and distance were often deceptive, leading to misjudgments of range. The B-29's designers recognized that eliminating the man from the loop was the only true path to perfection. This understanding paved the way for the conceptual leap into a fully automated future. In a hypothetical, classified corner of the American war effort, a small team was tasked with eliminating the human element entirely. This was Project Sentinel, a secret initiative to integrate early computer processing into the B-29's fire control. The goal was to create a fire-and-forget defensive system, the first true AI turret. This early AI was not a consciousness, but a network of complex relays and vacuum tubes processing radar data. It was designed to take the digital input from the B-29's radar and directly feed the turret motors. The gunner's role would be relegated to monitoring and overriding the system, no longer the primary aimer. The Sentinel system worked by continuously calculating the intercept point, updating the turret's position hundreds of times per second. The speed of the calculation was the core advantage, exceeding any human reaction time by a factor of 10. It used predictive modeling to anticipate the Night Ace's maneuvering, not just reacting to its current position. The challenge was miniaturizing the technology and hardening it against the brutal environment of high-altitude combat. The project was an enormous undertaking, blending electrical engineering with nascent computer science. Its very existence remained a tightly guarded military secret, known only to a handful of top scientists and commanders. The engineers believed that if the system worked, it would revolutionize air power overnight. The moment Project Sentinel was activated in a real-world test environment, the landscape of the night war changed forever. A flick of a switch transferred control from the human side to the digital brain. The gun turret, once prone to a slight hesitation, now moved with an unnatural, fluid precision. The AI could track a target at the extreme limit of the radar's range and hold the lock with unwavering consistency. It was like giving the B-29 a nervous system that reacted at the speed of light, not human thought. The system was programmed with the typical maneuvers and attack profiles of the Luftwaffe night aces. It learned to distinguish the random, erratic motion of an enemy from the regular, predictable movement of a friendly aircraft. This was the first true instance of a machine exhibiting a form of strategic awareness in combat. The gunners who first witnessed the system in action described the experience with a mixture of awe and unease. They watched the gun swing into position before they could consciously identify the threat themselves. The machine was making life-or-death decisions based on pure mathematics and a colossal amount of preloaded data. The night ace's cunning and experience were suddenly pitted against an unfeeling, tireless calculator. The algorithms eliminated the psychological factors that often caused human gunners to break their lock. The combat debut of the AI-operated turret system was a decisive, cold demonstration of computational superiority. A veteran night ace, confident in his tried-and-true stealth approach, closed on a lone B-29 under the cover of clouds. He executed a flawless Schrage music climb, a maneuver designed to be undetectable until the last moment. Before his guns could even be brought to bear, the B-29's tail turret unleashed a perfect, sustained burst of fire. The stream of .50 caliber tracers was not an area saturation attempt, but a calculated, three-dimensional line of destruction. The AI had already calculated the ace's final point of attack and had been waiting for him to arrive. The German fighter was instantly engulfed in fire and shrapnel, his surprise visible in the suddenness of his radio call. Other B-29s quickly followed, their defensive fire becoming surgically precise and utterly devastating. The night aces realized with terrifying speed that their tactics were no longer effective against the new defender. There was no human to fatigue, no fear to exploit, and no error margin to target in the B-29's new system. The number of successful interceptions by Luftwaffe night fighters against the superfortress dropped dramatically overnight. The era of the individual hunter-killer being able to bypass the defenses of a heavy bomber had effectively ended. The psychological impact on the remaining Luftwaffe night aces was immediate and crippling. They began to report being tracked with impossible accuracy, their evasive maneuvers seemingly anticipated. The sense of mastery they once possessed in the night was replaced by a chilling uncertainty. Their courage remained, but their confidence in their tactical superiority evaporated with every lost comrade. They tried new approaches, higher speeds, and more complex feints, but the B-29's AI remained unblinking. The AI turret system was a perfect foil, a machine designed to neutralize the very attributes that made the aces so deadly. The war in the dark became a war of attrition where technology was the ultimate victor over man. The aces' high-scoring records froze, a testament to a time when individual brilliance could still win the day. Some pilots refused to fly against the superfortress, recognizing the futility of fighting a purely mathematical opponent. The last great era of the fighter ace, the master duelist of the sky, was brought to an abrupt and calculated end. The once proud Natchjagd was relegated to a shadow of its former self, its reign over the dark skies broken. The night aces, who had once owned the night, found themselves merely flying into a meticulously planned ambush. The hypothetical success of Project Sentinel planted the seeds for the future of warfare that we recognize today. The B-29's AI-operated turrets proved the concept of automated, defensive combat systems was viable. It demonstrated that machine learning and high-speed computation could be a more reliable weapon than a human. This foundational idea led directly to the development of modern fire control computers, drone technology, and autonomous vehicles. The principle of removing the human reaction time from the lethal chain of engagement remains a core tenet of military design. The story of the Luftwaffe Night Aces is a poignant historical footnote on the evolution of air power. They were the last champions of the romantic, skill-based dogfight against the inexorable march of automation. The B-29, armed with its silent, tireless computational mind, was the harbinger of a new age. This shift was not just about better guns or faster planes, it was about the very nature of decision-making in combat. The darkness was no longer a place where human ingenuity could reliably hide or hunt. It became a domain where algorithms held a permanent, insurmountable advantage. The superfortress didn't just end the careers of the Night Aces, it retired an entire style of aerial warfare. Their legend lives on, but the chilling realization remains: the machine woke up, and it was superior.